Hi, this is Leonel Castillo. I'm with the Small Farm Outreach Program, and I would just like to say that I am very happy to be working with For the Soil, and I am all for soil conservation and hope that everybody follows our podcast. Thank you.
Well, it is my pleasure to welcome everyone to For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, and we've got a special episode lined up for you today. Mr. John Piotti, he is Chief Executive Officer of the American Farmland Trust, and we'll get to that conversation in just a moment. But first of all, I wanted to remind everyone that For the Soil, a Conversation, this is part of an awareness initiative. It's an initiative of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. The podcast is a collaboration of Virginia Cooperative Extension, On the Farm Radio, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. We do receive specific funding for this effort from the Agua Fund and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you to all the listeners of this podcast. Today's podcast is actually kind of an accidental podcast. It was intended for broadcast on our radio program On the Farm, but we talked a lot with John Piotti about soil health, and we decided this would be perfect for the podcast. Let's go to the show. Welcome to the program, the Chief Executive Officer of the American Farmland Trust, John Piotti. And John, for our listeners who have never heard of the American Farmland Trust, could you describe it for us?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. American Farmland Trust is an organization that's been around for over 40 years. Some people know our bumper sticker, our iconic green and white bumper sticker that says "No farms, no food." But we do a lot of things. We have offices across the country, and we both are involved in policy, advancing better policy for farming, mostly oriented towards what we call conservation agriculture. So that could be better practices for farmers to help improve the land, or it could be about farmland protection. And we do policy work. We do a lot of research to undergird that work. We do a lot of work in the field with farmers to help them adopt better policies and projects and the like.
An amazing amount of resources available at your website, and I don't have it right in front of me, but if I recall, it's farmland.org.
You got it. That's right.
Very good. Well, it was just a few weeks ago, I believe it was October the 16th, that we all celebrated World Food Day. Tell me about your involvement with that event.
Well, World Food Day really provides the perfect opportunity to think about our food system and the farms that support it. So food and agriculture really formed the foundation of civilization. And what I sometimes say is that we can't hope for a sustainable future without sustainable agriculture. And yet our food system is facing some challenges. We got a taste of that during the pandemic, with disruptions in the supply chain, created empty supermarket shelves, some high prices for some products. But those disruptions are small compared to what could happen in the future if we don't move towards a more resilient and sustainable food system. So World Food Day provides an opportunity for us to address those issues forthrightly, to really think about what we need in the future.
Now, you mentioned the term sustainable, and over the past 20 years or so, we have heard that term, that phrase, sustainable agriculture, used a lot. But now there's a newer phrase that we're hearing in the agriculture community, and that is regenerative agriculture. Yes. So for our listeners who don't know what that is, explain it to us.
Sure. I think the notion there is we want to do more than just sustain what we have now. We actually want to rebuild our soil health. So that's why the term regenerative is being used. But in some ways, the practices aren't really very different. It's a little bit more of a different mindset. Regenerative agriculture involves farming practices that grow food at the same time that they're rebuilding soil health. And this isn't a new concept. As you point out, organizations like American Farmland Trust have been working with farmers on better farming practices for over 40 years. And I think 25, 30 years ago, we usually used the term sustainable ag, but it's essence the same thing. And some of these practices, of course, go back centuries. But the term regenerative is being increasingly applied, and it's being appreciated for a host of good reasons, because better soil health translates into soil that naturally retains more water. That makes it more resilient to drought. It's also better able to withstand heavy rainfall events, as we're seeing more and more. And better soil increases productivity. But on top of all of that, when you rebuild soil, what we are doing is increasing the carbon content in that soil. And where does that carbon come from? Well, it comes from the atmosphere. It's brought down through the wonders of photosynthesis, and it's stored in the soil. And what that means is that better farming practices can actually help us sequester carbon and play a role in combating climate change. So what kind of practices are we talking about here? You'll hear about no-till and low-till. Every time you plow up land, you release some carbon, but if you manage that land without tilling it, you help the soil rebuild. You hear about cover crops. They're important. Better crop rotations, integrating livestock into crop production, and more. And so there are many tools that are at the ready, and different ones can be used in different combinations, in different ways on different farms.
How do we incentivize the improvement of soil health? And I'm not really talking about monetary or funding from the federal government or nonprofits, or how do we convince the average farmer that they have to improve the soil health for the next generation?
Well, it's a great question, because farmers, and I've worked with farmers my whole career. They're incredible people. They're stewards of the land. They care deeply about it, but they're often not in a position to make major changes on their property. Farming is a risky business. Farmers operate under very tight margins, and most have considerable debt. And so if they try something new that fails, they may be the one that loses the farm. That no one wants to be in that situation. So they're cautious. And what we can do is help them with information, and help them with what we sometimes refer to as technical assistance. So at American Farmland Trust, we do case studies that show how different practices on different farms, what the both financial and environmental benefits of making those changes have been. We walk farmers through the process of transitioning to new practices. And I know what you just said about, I'm not talking here about government incentives, but that does play a role too, because there are financial costs to taking on these new practices that aren't going to bring benefit for many years, and yet the farmer who's already on tight margins has to pay for the cover crop seed or the new grain drill or whatever might be needed to implement these practices. So it's a combination of things: technical assistance, good information, and some financial assistance through the government conservation programs is critical too.
We're talking today with John Piotti, Chief Executive Officer of the American Farmland Trust. And John, I'd like to get your take on another phrase that we often hear in the general news and the agricultural news these days, and that is the phrase climate change. What do farmers need to know about climate change?
Well, I actually think very few farmers deny that climate change is happening because they are living with it, and over time, farmers they've seen some broad changes in weather patterns. They've seen changes in planting cycles and pollination timing and pest pressure and the like, and then in many cases they've had to deal with some pretty catastrophic events: fires and floods, severe drought. Tens of thousands of acres of farmland out west were left fallow this year because of lack of water. And meanwhile, some Midwest farmers couldn't plant because the land was literally underwater. So climate change is real and happening. I think farmers are worried about the additional pressures it's going to put on their farm operation. I think, quite frankly, many farmers are also worried about what the government might do in the face of climate change to tell them how to farm. So there's concern out there, concern about what's happening in the environment, and concern about what steps government might take to force on farmers. But the silver lining here in all of this is that regenerative practices of the sort that I described below actually allow farmers to mitigate some of the worst impacts of climate change, like having soil that will retain water better. And at the same time, if all of our farmers were following better practices, we'd actually be combating climate change. We feel that agriculture in America has the chance to be what we call carbon neutral. We could have all of agriculture be sequestering more carbon than it's emitting, and that would be a huge benefit to agriculture and to our planet.
What are the consequences if we ignore this issue?
Oh, well, it's going to be catastrophic. We are going to have major shifts. You can look at this in so many different ways, but let's just focus on American agriculture for a moment. We're going to have major shifts in agriculture. We're going to have places where used to be fertile areas where we could grow, where because of temperature, because of rainfall, or even because of sea level rise. Think of how much land on the eastern seaboard is farmed right along the water. Those are pieces of farmland that are not going to be able to grow our food in the future in the face of climate change. So we really are going to lose a lot of land out of production. We need that food. We also need our farmland to provide a whole range of environmental services. I mentioned carbon sequestration, but let's not forget water recharge for underground aquifers. Let's not forget wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat, open space, and the like. So climate change is going to have a huge impact on farming. But as I said, farmers can play a very proactive role to both positioning their farms to weather some of the challenges and also to help us combat it.
Once again, we're talking with John Piotti, Chief Executive Officer for American Farmland Trust. And final question, John, for people who wanted to learn more about these issues and how it impacts agriculture, what would you recommend?
Well, I recommend everyone to become a member of American Farmland Trust. Go to our website, and that's farmland.org. And I guarantee we don't make any money off of your $25 membership. It costs us more than that to send out newsletters, but that's a great way for you to stay informed. And public policy has a role to play here, and we'll send action alerts when things are coming up in Congress and the like, where your involvement could really make a difference. So that's a great way to stay involved.
Do new members get one of those nice bumper stickers?
Absolutely. We will give you all the bumper stickers you want.
All right. Real pleasure having you on the program today. John Piotti, Chief Executive Officer of the American Farmland Trust. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.
And today we do have one of the 4 core principles of soil health: presented by Dr. Rory McGuire at Virginia Tech.
Keeping the soil covered is very important in terms of preventing soil erosion. Soil erosion is one of the biggest ways to decrease soil quality. If you lose the soil, you're losing the valuable part of your land. So keeping the soil covered prevents soil erosion. And when raindrops directly impact the soil, they can form a crust on the soil surface. They actually break the soil structure right at the soil surface. And once the soil structure is broken at the surface, you don't get any infiltration of water anymore. And of course, if water doesn't infiltrate, it runs off. And when it runs off, it takes the soil with it. So keeping the soil covered is extremely important in terms of preventing surface crust formation and soil erosion.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, just contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of The Flip Charts, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Ruiz. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.